Good evening, my friends, and welcome to Seaside Shadows Haunted History. My name is Johnny, and I am your storyteller for the evening. I flew in special just for you. So, if you're tuning in with us, pour yourself some spirits. See what I did there? And we'll get on with our story of that most beloved witch sister of ours, Hannah Cranna. Now, our story is set in the same town. Matter of fact, that those ghost hunters extraordinaire, Ed and Lorraine Warren, lived in, Monroe, Connecticut. Our heroine, if you will, Hannah Cranna, was married to a local sea captain. His name was Joseph Hovey. Ironically, Hannah Hovey dropped the Hovey after the demise of her husband. We'll get to that part next. So one day, according to local legends, Captain Hovey went out for a walk, and he was wandering around, and he never returned, ever. Apparently what happened was he got lost and disoriented and walked right off a cliff to his death. However, his wife, the enchantress, Hannah, dropped the last name Hovey and went by Hannah Cranna. And she started to encourage an already bad reputation of her being a witch. I would have done the same. Anyway, all of the townspeople, all of her neighbors, well, they said bad things about our Hannah, our beloved Hannah. They made her out to be a very evil witch, and maybe she was. But her modus operandi was this: I'll do for you if you do for me. I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. It always had to be the better part of the deal for our Hannah. One of the very special stories that I like about her is she was walking home one day and she went by a cottage. And apparently, the woman of the cottage had baked pies for her husband, and she had them on the windowsill to cool. Hannah, being Hannah, was sniffing the pies and saying, ooh, I need to have one of these pies. So she said to the lady of the cottage, I need one of your pies. So the woman of the cottage, not being the brightest bulb, picks up a very small pie and hands it to Hannah. Hannah says, no. I want that big pie. Well, the lady did not want to give up the pie. She said, no, that is for my beloved husband. That is his pie. You cannot have it. Well, as you can imagine, our Hannah girl was very unhappy. She was not happy one bit that she had been denied the big pie. Off she went with her small pie, and thinking to herself, she said, I hope her husband appreciates that big pie that should have been mine, because that woman will never bake another pie. And she never did, ever. She was never able to make a pie again. Terrible thing. Let's go to another page, shall we? So, Hannah lived near a brook where people would like to go fishing for trout. This time of year is great for fishing for trout, don't you think? I love some fresh brook trout myself. There was a stream that ran through her property on Cutler's Farm Road in Monroe. Or it might have been Turkey Roost Road, but we won't argue those points. Anyway, this creek was known to have brookies. You know, beautiful brook trout. Anyway, one of Hannah's neighbors decided that he was going to fish that brook without asking permission. So he did, and he started fishing on the brook, and she caught him in the act, and she cursed him. And he never was able to catch another trout, ever. Hannah had a way of making the worst things in the world come back to the person. Hannah may have been the bringer of bad karma. We don't like that. She was not a nice girl, our Hannah, was she? So she had this incredible skill that she could curse people. Oh, it's time for more spirits. Where was I? The farmers who lived around Hannah all knew she was a witch, and she had gotten quite the reputation of being a wicked witch. But really, is there such a thing as a wicked witch? I don't think there is. I think that that's pish-posh, nonsense. No, 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 no. No such thing as a wicked witch. Maybe just a woman with a little attitude. Anyway, back to the story. One of the local farmers came to Hannah because they were in a drought. It was a terrible drought. Terrible. And begged and implored and pleaded with Hannah, please, can you do something? Can you please make it rain so that we don't lose all our crops? Our children will die. Now, Hannah, being Hannah, really couldn't care if the children died, or if the neighbors died, or if the farmers died. There had to be something in it for her. Finally, after bargaining and holding this man, she said, I will make it rain. And the price will be your immortal soul. And he did it. Desperate times, desperate measures. Well, that night at midnight, don't you know, the skies opened up and it thundered and it lightened and it stormed for days and the rain came and the crops were saved. But poor old farmer lost his immortal soul and soon thereafter his life. It's too bad. In her later years, when she became a crone, our beloved Hannah made a pet of a rooster. Everyone likes to have a cock. She named him Old Boreas. She claimed that he always crowed precisely at midnight, and the neighbors would also swear to this. That rooster never missed midnight. You would have been able to set your clock on it if you had had a clock back then. They said that the Wonder Rooster, that's how they referred to him, the Wonder Rooster. How do you get a Wonder Rooster? What makes a rooster wonderful? These are questions to ponder. Anyway, he died. The mighty cock died and was laid to rest. Hannah, being Hannah, had an impressive candlelit burial for him. She went into deep mourning for her late companion. She told a neighbor who tried to comfort her that she was going to die herself. The neighbor said, no, no, no. You're not going to die just because your rooster died. It doesn't work that way, Hannah. Not even in your weird world. However, it came to pass. Hannah died just a few short days after her beloved rooster. She told the neighbor before she died exactly what her burial instructions were to be. That her casket was to be carried by hand, and that she was to be buried at midnight. Sorry, it was the spirits. She had to be buried at midnight, and her casket had to be hand carried to the burial site. Now this was summertime when Hannah passed away, and they say that a great blizzard came in overnight, and there was snow and wind and gale winds, and it was terrifying. They tried to lift the casket. It was just a wooden box, and they had all of the neighbors and the farmers, and they tried to lift the wooden box onto their shoulders and walk in the snow, and they couldn't. So they got an old sled. They put Hannah's casket on it, and they start making their way to the cemetery. They lose their touch on the sled, and it took off down the hill, and it ended up back at Hannah's house on her front steps. What were they to do? They couldn't lift it and carry it the way that she demanded. They got the sled again, and this time they took chains, and they chained Hannah's casket to it. Chained it, held it still, and they took it in a horse-drawn sled to the graveyard. This time, the sled had scarcely started to move. Hardly at all. And by this time, all of the farmers and all of the pallbearers and all of the neighbors who called her the Wicked Witch, they were hitting the spirits themselves. So who knows whose fault it was? Was it their fault for hitting the spirits? Is that why they lost control of the casket yet again? It was almost impossible for them to handle it. They got to the cemetery finally. The sun had gone down. They were so happy, and they congratulated each other. They get her buried in hallowed ground, even though she was a wicked witch. And as they're going past her house, it burst into flames. It burned to the ground and left nothing more than a steaming cellar hole in the ground. So was that Hannah's final curse? What do you think? Do you think Hannah had that power to reach out after death? Does anyone have that power to reach out after death? Many people think that Cranna may indeed be the legendary White Lady of Monroe. She's seen very often in Union Cemetery. The White Lady is a very terrifying specter. Many people have seen her. She's been photographed. It very well could be our Hannah Cranna has been haunting the cemetery in Monroe all of these years. I hope you've enjoyed this story tonight as much as I've enjoyed telling you. As I'm talking to you, my familiar cat is looking at me from across the room. I have to keep checking him out. I've enjoyed very much being here with you. I hope that you'll tune in again next Sunday night for another one of our storytellers with Seaside Shadows. We are hoping that all of you are staying safe. We don't want you to be joining the other side. Not yet. And before you know it, we'll all be able to be back together again on one of our Haunted Mystic tours. Until next Sunday, my darlings.